This is Gemara and Ervin, Daf Yomi. This is Shabbos' Daf. Apologies for the slight delay in recording due to travel. Of course, all the learning for Chedishel is sponsored as Chus for Shlim Shan Teva Bas Esther, as well as Chus in Nishmaster Pastor Rezel Pastor Meir. We pick it up at the beginning of the new parak, the third parak of Ervin, Baruch Hashem. One more time, we begin the beginning of the third parak of Ervin. B'chol ma'arvin u'mishtatzvin chutz min ha'mayim u'min ha'melech v'akol nikach v'ketz ha'mayiser chutz min ha'mayim min ha'melech hanoidim min ha'mazoin mutter b'melech u'b'mayin. So we have a bunch of halachas over here. The ikar halacha, which everything begins from, is this halacha of making an eruv. We know that you cannot carry from one shesiyachad to another shesiyachad. As well, this is going to be an eruv techumim. You're not allowed to carry more than 2,000 amos outside of your rishos, outside of the city. 12,000 amos perhaps midaraisa. These are dina that we're going to get to. But the one basic halacha that we all know is you have to make an eruv. You have to create some sort of oneness. So what do you have to do? So we always said you got to put a box of matzah, you got to put a chal there. So it says the Mishnah, B'chol ma'arvin u'mishtatzvin, you can make a sheet of mevois, you can make an eruv chutz min ha'mayim min ha'melech. Aside for water and salt, those are two items which, as we're going to see, as no chashivas, are not considered foods at some level, and therefore you cannot use them to create the eruv. Akol nikach mikasef meiser, and everything you're allowed to use kesef meiser when you redeem meiser sheni in order to buy produce in Eretz Yisrael. You can buy whatever you want, chutz min ha'mayim min ha'melech, except for water and salt. Ha'noider min ha'mazayin. Someone who makes a neder from muzzling, from food, mutter, he's allowed to have all foods. Mutter by melech, he's allowed to have even water and salt, again, because they're not foods. Ma'arvin the nazir b'yayin, and now there's another halacha that when you're making an eruv for a nazir who generally cannot eat wine, but for the eruv you're allowed to. Again, we're starting to see that it's more of a theoretical, a potential to drink something, not a practical. And again, the Gemara is going to explain this. Yisrael, but Shuman as well, Yisrael could do truma, even though he himself cannot eat it, but he can give it to a kayin, and that is enough to create the eruv. Sumchas aimer b'chulin ulekayin. I'm sorry, b'chulin. You all know it has to be some silchas with chulin and not with truma. Again, all these things, these dinim, the Gemara is going to explain. Ulekayin bebeis apras, and a kayin you're allowed to even put the eruv inside a beis apras, which is an area that a kayin is not allowed to go to midrabanan, because we're afraid of tama. Rav Yehuda Aimer afilu beina kvaros, that even with the eruv between the kvaros, somewhere the kohen certainly cannot go to, but still that is allowed. Says the Gemara. What is the reason? The reason is because you could potentially fly over there. What does that mean? If you look at the top Rashi over here, Rashi tells us that you could create a mechitza beinoyu beina kever shtayalu, so you don't create an oil like you put yourself into a box. Somehow the kohen is going to get inside the base of kvaros, and then once the kohen is inside the base of kvaros, he'll be able to get to the eruv. So again, we're starting to get some of the feel of when it comes to this din of eruv. What exactly do you need? We're seeing the Gemara now, the Mishnah. Number one is to create any food, just not water and salt. And number two, we're seeing a lot of theoretical potentials to be able to get the eruv is going to be enough, and that is something that we're going to discuss. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yechon, the beginning of Chavzayin of Alef. Amar Rav Yechon, ein lemidim min ha'klolois. Do not learn from general rules. Even if it says chutz, meaning you would think that's the greatest general rule. It says, for example, this is the rule, and it applies in all cases, aside for case A. So you would think all the other cases it's true. It says Rav Yechanan, don't learn from rules. It's not necessarily true. Says the Gemara, Midika Amar afilu. What did Rav Yechanan say? Number one, ein lemidim min ha'klolos. Don't learn from general rules. And then he added on, ve'afilu, and even in a place that it says chutz. So the Gemara learns out from there, from the Midika Amar afilu, b'makom she'amar chutz. What do we see from there? Mechlal delav hachakoi. That the makar, that the root case of Yechanan is not our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said you got to make an eruv from everything, just not salt and water. So it says the Gemara, for the fact that Yechanan said, do not learn from general rules, and even when it says chutz, it shows us that there's a root case where he learned it out from, and then he himself added on, and even when it says chutz. So the prime example of this case will not be our Mishnah where it says chutz. There must be a different case that we can learn it out from. Says the Gemara, Heichai Kai, where did Rav Yechanan know this from? Hasam Kai learned it from over there. Call mitzvahs as Eisha's man grandma, a very famous statement. Any mitzvah, a time-bound mitzvah, she'az zaran grandma. The time causes it anashim chayavim v'nashim turais. Men are chayim in such a mitzvah, but women are pater. V'shaloyaz man grandma, when the time does not cause it, echanashim echanashim, men and women chayavim, they're both chayiv. Says the Gemara, uklalu, and what's this general rule? The chol mitzvah seishas man grama nasha p'turais. Is it true that any time bound mitzvah, meaning before Rav Yechon came along, we believe rules. The rule says any time bound mitzvah, women are pater. Rav Yechon taught us it's not true. This is the makar, this is the root case. Because what did this price teach us? Any time it's time bound, women are pater. Says the Gemara, is that true? Hare matzah zivcha v'hakel, the mitzvah seishas man grama, the mitzvah is matzah on Pesach. The mitzvah of Simcha and Yantav coming up in Mitzvah Shem Sukkos, all Yom Tovim, all the Chagim. Mitzvah of Hakel that after Yom Tov they would gather all Klai Yisrael to listen to Mishnah Torah. The mitzvah says Shazman Gramu. These are time-bound mitzvahs, and yet V'nashim Chayavais, women are chayiv. So says the Gemara, we clearly see that this rule is not true, and the Gemara proves it further. Meaning, like Rav Yochanan said, that don't believe rules. It says and anytime it says she's not a time-bound mitzvah, Nashim Chayavais. Tell me, every single non-time-bound mitzvah, women are chayiv. Hooray! We know Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah is not a time-bound mitzvah. One is mechuyev to learn every second of the day. Of course, when he has to use the bathroom, when he has to eat, when he has to perhaps make parnasa and anything else, it's not that. It's at that moment he can't learn, but he is essentially chayiv at every moment of the day. For every year as well, having children, a pintin aben, and redeeming a firstborn. The mitzvah say shaloy as man grandma. They're not bound by time; they're always relevant, and yet v'nashem b'turais. So what do we see? Ela Amar Rav Yochanan. These are the two prime examples. Ein lameidim mina klalois. Do not learn out from general rules. Even where it says chutz, which would seem like the greatest rule, says Rav Yochanan, no, do not learn out from over there. And that is makar number one to this klal, that klalim are not true. That don't necessarily learn out from klalim. Rule number one, we learned it out from where? Mitzvah seisha zman grama, mitzvah seisha loya zman grama. Does not necessarily always conform to the rules of women or chayiv or mar pater. Amar Abaye, I'll tell you another makar. Vitim Rav Yirmiyah, Avan anamitini, I have another brace for you. Oid kalach or amru, another klal. Kol shenisal gabi azav tamei. Anything that a zav carries, that item is tamei. Anytime the zav that is carried upon it, tar, then that item is going to be tar. Again, we know zav is someone who has some sort of a mission, a not normal emission, and then he is tameh. So if that zav, if that person is carrying something, he transmits tumah to that item. However, if that person is being carried by something, we'll define that in a moment, tar, he is tar. Chutz, except for what? Min ha'roy l'mishkav l'mayshav. Something which is made for sitting down. Something which is made for sitting down, then when a zav sits on it, he, yes, will transmit tumah to it. And as well, v'adam, if a person carries him. Says the Gemara, v'sulaka, so that was a rule. So before Rav Yochanan came along, we would think we believe rules. Rav Yochanan taught us, don't believe rules. So now the Gemara says, v'sulaka, and this is Rabbi in the name of Yirmiyah's pshat. V'sulaka, there are no other times that a zav gives off tumah. V'yika merkav. There is the case of the zav riding on something. Gemara says, 1 second. Hi, America, v'echitami. What's the case when the zav is riding something? In the Yosef Allah, if the zav is sitting on it, hainu moishav. That's the regular case of sitting on something, which we just said a moment ago. This is what I meant. The top part of the saddle, the part that the zav holds on. He's not actually sitting on it, but he's holding it, and that is enough to transmit Tomah. The Tani went to the Raisa. Ha'okav tamei moishav v'atofos tamei tamei. The oikav is tamei moishav, and the tofos is going to be tamei merkav. Rather, what do we see? Says Abai in the name of Rabbi Yirmiyah, what do we see from here? That we do not learn out from general rules. And even in a place where it says chutz, if anyone wants the literal translation, the ukaf is is the saddle, and the tafos, this thing that you hold on to, is called a pommel. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Pommel. Is yes subject to this tumah of America, which is another type of tumah that when the zav is riding and it's normal to be upon it. That was two Mekairis, this rule of Rav Yochanan, that rules don't necessarily follow suit. Says Ravina name Rav Yochanan, I'll tell you a raya also. Our Mishnah. Everything you can do for an Arab or for a shittim and voice, so for water and salt. Are there no other things that are excluded? Mushrooms you can't use for Arab either. Even in a place where it says chutz, and that is the end of the segment of the Gemara. So 3 Mekairos that we do not necessarily learn from Mekairos, for we don't learn from general rules. Number one was, who said number one? I'm sorry, was Rav Yochanan. No, Rav Yochanan is the one that taught us that we don't say the general rules. Number one was I can't find it right now, is Mitzvah Seishas Man Grama, which the Gemara just brought down. I'm sorry, no one said that one. The second one was by the name of Yechanan, was from the din of Zav, din of Zav, and the last one was this Kaminu Patrius. Says the Gemara, I call Nichach Meiser. Continuing the Mishnah, once the Mishnah listed salt and water, the Mishnah listed other items of salt and water. We're on the last quarter of the Amid. Says the Gemara, I call Nichach Meiser v'chulu. Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yesi bar Chinna, Chan Masni Yeruva, Chan Masni Ameiser. That part of the Mishnah said anything can be purchased with Kesef Meiser. What's it referring to? So one learned it's referring to din of Eruv, and one learns referring to din of Meiser. Now the Gemara explains again. Chan mas Eruv, Chan Meiser. Chan mas Eruv lo yishno ela mayim b'fnei atzmai umelech b'fnei atzmai de'ein ma'arvin. You cannot make an Eruv of just water or just salt. Avol b'mayim umelech ma'arvin. If water and salt together, then you could just make the Eruv out of it. Chan mas Meiser. And one learned this din about Meiser lo yishanu ela mayim. This whole din is only by mayim, by water, b'fnei atzmai, milk b'fnei atzmai. Dini kacha, that you're not allowed to use it when you bring up the money that you redeemed your meiser sheni produce. You can't buy water or salt by itself. Mayim umelach nikachin, because of a meiser that you're allowed to, yes, buy with this money a meiser. Says the Gemara, man demasni a meiser. The one who learned this is a din about meiser. Meiser is din daraisa. Kol shekina Erev, certainly for din derabanan to allow you to buy the salt and water together. You need actual fruit, and water and salt is not going to be fruit, and the one's only derabanan, so you're not going to learn it out. It's a din deraisa meiser. Because Rav Yitzchak masni a meiser, Rav Yitzchak learned it, that's referring to a meiser, that you're allowed to buy water and salt together. Meis face asked the Gemara, hey, Rav Yitzchak ben Kaddish of Nei Rav Lazar shall be Sava. Hayoloich seer, they would buy fish brine, bekesev meiser, with the money of meiser. Amar loy shamlei shamata elik shekir v'davgum Ervin boy. Ben, he said, what are you talking about? He used to buy brine. Maybe they only used to buy the brine when the fish and the innards of the fish are mixed together, and that's why they would buy it with kesem meiser. Va'afilu Rav Yehuda ben Gaddish like Amar el b'tzir deshumna. The beriu, that the brine that has oil in it, that's considered a beri. Avol mayim umelach loy, but regular salt and water you can't. So the Gemara is asking, you just told me a second ago that you can't buy salt by itself or water by itself with meiser sheni, but you, yes, could buy the combination of salt and water. We see clearly in this price and not that way. We see clearly in this price only the fish in, only the brine, together with the fish, together with the innards, but just water and salt, I'm sorry, not soda and walt. Lie, it doesn't work. Amar Rav Yosef says the Gemara, moving on to Chav Zayin Rabbeis, no, the case is talking about they put inside of it oil, and that's the reason why it's not just water and salt, it's water and salt with oil, and then it's going to be similar to the case of the fish brine with the shamnunis, with the oil of the fish inside of it. 1 second, if you put oil inside of it, so why are you telling me that the reason why you're allowed to buy this mixture with the money of meiser sheni is because it's not water, it's not salt, it's water and salt together? What are you talking about? It's water, salt, and oil. So the reason you're allowed to buy it is because it has oil in it. Like Tzricha says the Gemara 3 lines down, Chav Zayin Beis, Shenosan Demei Mayim Umelach Ba'avlo. You paid for Shenosan Demei that you paid for the salt and the water behavla, in as it like gets swallowed up. Let's see the second Rashi before we continue the Gemara. It says Rashi behavla b'shvil ha'mayim ha'melach kana hashemin. You didn't actually pay for the oil. That's the biggest chiddush in the world. What did you pay for? You paid for water, you paid for salt, and then they threw in some oil. Again, and that is the chiddush, that since there is oil in it, the havlah, that's enough to give it a name of a food, of a peri, and if you could buy it with money of meiser sheni. Says the Gemara, 1 second, havlah shari. Is that accurate? Are you actually allowed to buy something ba'avla? Sounds wild. Sounds like with the money of meiser sheni, not only are you buying food, you're also being allowed to throw in all other items. Who says that's true? Says the Gemara, in it is accurate vatanya, and then we bring you a raya. This vatanya is not a question. Rather, this vatanya is a raya. Generally, vatanya is a question. Here it is not. Says the Gemara, in vatanya ben baga goimer ba'bakar. The pasuk says that you're allowed to buy bakar. Bakar al gava oiroi. You're allowed to buy bakar, you're allowed to buy animals together with its flesh, which is a chiddush, because the hides are not proper food. So you would think with the money of meiser sheni that you redeemed your produce to go up there to Israel to eat the food there, you would think only buy food. The actual animal says you might even buy the oyer, the skin. Uba atzayin, the pasuk considers with the sheep. You're You're allowed to buy the sheep together with this wool. Ubayayin, and with the wine, you're allowed to buy the wine together with its barrel. You're allowed to buy this tamid even once it gets sour, or not really sour, once it gets alcoholic. So the Gemara is learning it out from this pasuk, especially mudim, that with the money of Meiser Sheni, not only you allowed to buy the animal, the food, but rather together with that you allowed to do havla and throw in non-food items. Certainly so too by over here by us, that you're getting the non-food water and salt together with the oil. If someone explains to me this Joshua, says Rav Yechon, you explain to me that Joshua Baboiker, according to Ben Bagag, I will carry your clothing into the bathhouse. Rav Yechon said, I now don't understand what that pasuk is talking about. Says Gemara, what's going on? My time. Kulu. Srichi levar mibaka. What's the reason? Because kulu srich levar mibaka, you need all the other parts of the pasuk, side part of the pasuk of bakir. The light tzarech is not necessary. It's an extra part of the pasuk, and that's what Rav Yechon was saying. If you explain to me the extra part of the pasuk, I'll carry your clothing to the bathhouse. Let's see what that means. My srichi. Because Rachman about bakar, if it would have just said about the cattle, bakar, cattle, who dim is davin al gav oirei. Cattle is something that is prepared, that it goes together with the flesh, with the skins, and that's the reason why we're allowed to view them as one entity, and as much as you're getting a separate item as a skin, where you're allowed to do that together with the bakar. Mishum de gufehu, because it's all one, it's part of its body. Avol tzoyin, when it comes to sheep, al gav's gissa, to get the sheep and its wool, to lav gufehu, is not its actual body, it's separated from emalai. You would think not. Again, you would think you're allowed to buy a sheep with the money of Meiser Sheni. Who says you could buy the wool on the sheep? Says the Gemara, you wouldn't have thought that's what I had to say by tzoyin. Because Rachman about tzoyin, al gav gissa, hava amina, I would have thought that what's that mean? Mishum de mechober ba. At the end of the day, it's true that the wool is a separate entity, but it's connected with the sheep. But to purchase wine with a barrel, I would think that doesn't work, because the wine and the barrel are two separate entities. Says the Gemara, and that's the reason why we need each part of the pasuk. And again, we're in the middle of trying to figure out why did Rav Yechon feel this was such a complicated concept that Rav Yechon said, I'll carry your clothing all the way to the bathhouse. Says the Gemara, so now the Gemara says, if it would have just said, meaning, let's just get the breakdown of the Gemara. The Gemara just taught us that each part of the pasuk teaches us something different. Soyin, bakar, yayin, each one teaches a separate part of the pasuk. Now the Gemara is going to prove that we didn't really need all four drashas. And now we're going to move backwards. We're going to start from the bottom up. We start from yayin. Each one is going to be a bigger chadish. And at the end of the Gemara, the question is going to be, why do you need bakar? Why do you need that pasuk? It should be implicit. It should be understood once you know the other part of psukim. And that's going to be the question of Yechon. If you explain that to me, I'll carry your clothing. Now let the Gemara explain. He goes, what would I have thought? You know why you can take the wine, you let it take the barrel with it, because that's how the wine is guarded. But this tamed wants to get sour. Just the nothingness. I would think you can't take it. Because Rachman is sheikher. Stare said sheikher, you let it yes buy beer. Sheikher. He goes, Rachman is sheikher, my sheikher, the bila, kialis, the beira. There was a type of sheikher which is sort of congealed in a hard fruit. It was an actual fruit too. I would think wine with the jug, that doesn't work. Fine, so that's why to write those two. He goes, okay, because the barrel guards it, make sure it doesn't spoil. But by the sheep, gives so with the wool. What's the wool doing for the sheep? So you would think you could buy the sheep with the money of Meiser Sheni, but not the wool. Because Rachman sign. The af al gav gissa, even though it's the sheep. So why do we need the pasuk of bakar? We're stuck. Once we know you can do the sheep with the wool, of course you can do the animal with its hide. So why did the Torah have to say the extra drasha of bakar? Says Gemara, and if you're going to try to, shtupen up shot, you like Rachman about bakar, because if it didn't say bakar, I would have had a hava amina sign al gabe oirei. Maybe a sheep, the chiddush of the sheep is the sheep with its hide, not the sheep with the wool in. Al gav gives salai, but the sheep, but the wool, no. Because Rachman about bakar, lasui oirei, so it said bakar to include this hide, and then yaitale sign, and then the word sign is actually, we don't need that at all. Says Gemara, lasui gissa, and therefore it comes to include the wool. You look at Rachman Bakar, love Amina. You never have thought that. Why would you have thought that the sheep It's only with the skin and not with the wool. That's a strange thing because the wool is the thicker part of the sheep. Should have just said bakar. The memeli had to lay sign. So now the Gemara concludes this long-winded question. Now that it says sign, and now that we know you're allowed to buy the sheep even with the wool on it, why did the Torah have to say bakar? Has to sign al God gives some is davna. You could buy the wool with the sheep. Bakar al gavayra mi buy. Hainu de kamer Rav Yechlan. That is what Rav Yechlan meant when he said, "Man, the currently leave a bakar, leave it to ben bagbag. Ma'avil na man of Yisuz al carry his clothing into the bathhouse." Says the Gemara, and that's the end of the Gemara. The Gemara doesn't actually answer it. The Gemara doesn't tell us what exactly the drasha of Rav Yechlan was. What this drasha of the bathhouse was. Says the Gemara, but my kamifki Rav Yehuda ben Gadish Rav Elazar. What is this machlekes that we had in Amud Aleph? Rav Yehuda ben Gadish Rav Elazar. The Gemara is not going to explain. Kamifki, my kamifki. I'm sorry. V'hani tanai till come on. These tanai. Rav Yehuda ben Gadish Rav Elazar darshi rebuye umuti. Now we're going to go and learn out how do we learn everything out of these psukim. So Rav Yehuda ben Gadish Rav Elazar, they learned out a type of drasha, which is a drasha riba yamiyat. You have the Torah included and then Torah specified and then it included. The Hani Tanai and the other Tanaim, Dashi Klali Prati, a different way of learning something out of the Torah. Now the Gemara explains. Rav Yehuda ben Gadish, second wide line, Chavzayim in a base. Rav Yehuda ben Gadish, Rav Elazar, Dashi ribu yamiyuti. How do we learn that out? You should take the money with whatever you want, the money of the Ma'aser Sheni. Riba. Torah is expansive. The Torah includes everything. Bakar, then it says only bakar. Miyat, that's exclusions. Whatever you're going to ask, riba. Again, it includes everything. Riba, miyat, riba. What's the rule when we have an inclusion? Then we have a specification, and then we have an inclusion. Riba akal comes to include everything. My Rabbi, so what does it come to include? Rabbi called mili. Oh my miyat always has to exclude something. The reason why we have the exclusion, the Rav Elazar, miyatzir, Rav Yehuda ben Gadish, miyamayim melech. And that's where Rav Yehuda ben Gadish and Rav Elazar and Rav Aleph learned out. One man Davar said you can't do the fish brine, one man Davar said you can't do the water and the water and the zolta, I'm sorry, was why? Because it a riba, miyat, and riba. V'hani tanai, and those who argue Rav Yehuda ben Gadish and Rav Elazar, what do they learn? Says the Gemara, Darshi klali uprati, a different way of learning how to drash. The time went to the price and the kids klal, meaning riba and klal are very similar. Klal is general and riba is an inclusion. It's obviously very similar. So this man doesn't learn that's a klal. Prat is the specification. Klalu pradu klali at the danal keina prat something similar. Ma prat mefurash pri me pri vigedule karka. I've called pri me pri vigedule karka. So we come to learn out anything which is a pri from pri and grows from the ground. But Tanya idach, I'm going to conclude with this, and we're going to see this last part because this really brings us into the next Amud. But Tanya idach, what is the other man damar old ma prat mefurash vlad vladais ba'aretz. The vladais aretz, something which grows from the ground. Of kavlav vladais aretz. My beinayom rabbi dogim fish is the nafka minik beinayom. Madam pri geduli karka on a dogim geduli karka. They're at some level they consider geduli that they grown out of the ground. Ninu madam vlad vlados haaretz dogim imei ivroi. They do not go from the ground. And we'll pick it up from here in the next daf.